In 1975, a family moved into my neighborhood that I had lived in since I was a child. And my parents met their parents, and they had 5 children, and they were all in and around my age, so I got to meet them. And I went to their home one day, and they were not from the United States. They were immigrants in, and so they did meals differently than we did. We're kind of New World. They were not New World. They weren't Westerners. And so I went to their home, and I had a nice meal, and then the lady of the house invited me to her kitchen, which I didn't realize was a real treat, and it was a treat. She invited me to her kitchen, and on her little kitchen table where they would eat breakfast was a cheese board. There was a cheese board there, had a little piece of marble, and then the wood around it. Remember those old lucite dome things, had a little wood thing on top. And this is 1975. I was 18 years old or 17 years old in high school, and in it was cake. Not cheese, cake. And she goes, "Bill, would you like a piece of cake?" And Bill likes cake. It was interesting. It wasn't a fancy cake, I think, and I'm not offending anybody here, but I think it was a box cake. It was Duncan Hines, the marble cake, half vanilla, half chocolate, no icing, nothing special on it, no M&Ms on it, nothing. It was just a piece of cake. She cut a piece for me, cut a piece for her son, cut a piece for her. And we sat around that little table of 4, and we ate the cake. That was 1975. Every time I went to see her, she offered me a piece of cake. I thought it was kind of like that lady in the Old Testament where the oil never ran out. There was a cake underneath. It might have been a half a cake, it might have been a quarter left. There was a piece of cake, the same one. The marble cake. I fell in love with the marble cake. But I have to tell you, I fell in love with this lady. Her name was Mrs. Barber, is Mrs. Barber. She's 89 years old, I think, now. And every time I went there, she said, "Bill, come here." Now, it was amazing because she would serve filet and lamb and all these other things. After all this great meal and the tabbouleh and the fattoush and all these salads I left, she'd go, "Bill, come in here. I got a piece of cake for you." And that was 40 years ago this year. 40 years ago this year. Every time I go, I have cake. And she always served it on the cheese board. I didn't know why you served cake on a cheese board, but it was kind of funny. She and I developed this incredible relationship. An older lady from the old world, a younger boy from the new world. We had nothing in common except we both loved Jesus and we loved this cake. The 20s, the 30s, the 40s, I became a pastor of this church. So I would call her and said, "Mrs. Barber, can I come over and visit you?" Her husband was dying. We'd go over and pray with her husband. Her husband passed away. She served me the cake. The cake was there every single time. Last year, I called her, Elizabeth, and I said, "Can we come over and see you?" She said yes. She's quite aged. Doesn't quite remember everything as she did. She's such a lady. Just one of those bigger-than-life ladies. And she said, "I'm going to bake the cake." So she baked the cake. Now, whether her daughter-in-law baked it or someone else, the cake was there. And it wasn't on the cheese board. I said, "What happened to the cheese board?" She said, "It broke." We had this laugh, but here's the thing. This year, one of the times, we go over a lot, but I went over and visited her, and she said, "I'm sorry, I can't bake you a cake anymore. I don't have the ability to bake you a cake." I said, "It's not about the cake." You see, she and I eat a different meal with each other. We have such a friendship. She and I have nothing in common except I did marry her niece eventually. But she loved me before I even knew her niece. Her niece lived in Orlando at the time. Why? Because she took in a young boy who she called Billy. I think she still does. And she gave me a meal. And we shared a meal with each other. So Friday, I went to visit her. She's in the hospital, had an operation. She was asleep, and so I didn't get to talk to her. We'll talk to her this week. She's doing much better, but still pray for her. And I got to pray for her. What a privilege it is to pray for a lady who has been concerned about this boy for 40 years, all over a piece of Duncan Hines cake. You see, it's not what you serve people, but you can call people to the Lord. You have the ability to call people to the Lord. Wisdom is calling them, but you have the ability as well. And let me tell you, each of us have the opportunity to share the love of Christ with someone else. As this lady did, among many others who have had an effect on my life, this lady, we had this little thing going on. It still is, it's incredible. But she's not long for this world. I don't know if it's weeks or years, God only knows. But each of us have an opportunity. Take it while you are living, and take an opportunity to call, as wisdom calls, people to the Lord. Let's pray together.